Are you a manual therapist ready to expand your clinical reach and deepen your effectiveness? Upledger Craniosacral Therapy addresses deep restrictions, supports neurological and fascial systems, and enhances whole body function by working with the body's natural healing processes. For over 40 years, Upledger Institute International has led the field of craniosacral therapy, offering an approach that integrates seamlessly into any manual therapy practice and supports common to complex and chronic conditions. Find a class near you at upledger.com/courses or call 800-233-5880 extension 2 and begin your craniosacral therapy training for as little as $100 a month. Physical and emotional burnout affect most massage therapists, and many leave the field within a decade. Created by Fernando Rojas, Massage Hall of Famer and Master Somatic Therapist and Educator, Somatic Mindfulness bridges somatics and bodywork, teaching self-care as a professional skill. It makes the therapist's well-being the method, not just part of the formula. By prioritizing resilience, therapists create the conditions for healing for both client and practitioner and renew their insight and clarity of purpose. Visit somaticmindfulness.co to learn more.
Hi, and welcome to I Have a Client Who, Pathology Conversations with Ruth Werner, the podcast where I will discuss your real-life stories about clients with conditions that are perplexing or confusing. I'm Ruth Werner, author of A Massage Therapist's Guide to Pathology, and I have spent decades studying, writing about, and teaching about where massage therapy intersects with diseases and conditions that might limit our clients' health. We almost always have something good to offer, even with our most challenged clients, but we need to figure out a way to do that safely, effectively, and within our scope of practice. And sometimes, as we have all learned, that is harder than it looks.
Dear listeners, I had planned on working on something entirely different today, but I opened my Facebook messages and I found this, and I decided I had to answer it right away. So, for all the other 3,000 deadlines that are hanging over my head right now, too bad. And here's what the message said. Hey, Ruth, I'd like to have a conversation with you about herpes. I have a student at my school who has some issues about working on people who mark that box on their intake form in the student clinic. I do understand about pathology and shedding, and even when there's not an outbreak, and I know that the likelihood of contracting herpes by giving a massage with your hands is highly unlikely if there's no outbreaks on the skin and we're not touching their genitals or their mouths. But she does have a point, and I'd like to address it. And I'm wondering if that's why California went to wearing gloves. Is it somehow more risky with forearms? I think the general population over 50, there's probably a very high percentage of people who carry the virus in one form or another. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on this. And I'm wondering how I want to handle this with the student and the client. Well, thank you, contributor, for this more complicated than it looks like question. The issue of herpes is complex and it holds some nuance, and it can really be scary for a lot of people. But as we will discover together, it's just sort of one of those things that we have to deal with. Now, way back when I was in massage school, which was 1983-ish, this was before HIV/AIDS was making enough news that we were paying attention to it. And consequently, at that time, the very worst sexually transmitted infection that anyone could think of was herpes. It was so stigmatized that nice people tried really hard not to call it herpes. We called it cold sores or fever blisters. And oh my goodness, no, it's not herpes. It's just a little cold sore. Well, with the advent of understanding HIV/AIDS plus hepatitis B and hepatitis C and a whole slew of other sexually transmitted infections that have not only made it into the headlines, but have really shifted the culture around what these mean to a certain extent. The stigma around herpes has really, really lessened, so much so that anyone who watches late night TV at this point can probably remember seeing a commercial about the treatment for genital herpes. Have you seen that one where he says, "I have genital herpes," and she says, "And I don't." And they sort of put their arms around each other and they say, "And we want to keep it that way." Well, when I saw that commercial, my jaw about hit the floor. But ultimately, isn't this a good thing? That more people know about this condition, and so more people are talking about it honestly and are able to take care of their health. So let's do a quick review then about herpes simplex. Herpes simplex virus, HSV, is one of a really large family of viruses. This includes cytomegalovirus and Epstein-Barr and varicella zoster that causes chickenpox and a whole bunch of others. But we're going to put our focus now on herpes simplex. Herpes has traditionally been associated with outbreaks on and around the mouth or outbreaks on or around the genitals. And there's been traditionally recognized a slight difference in the strain of virus that we find in these two regions. So herpes simplex virus type 1 was associated with oral herpes, type 2 was associated with genital herpes. These delineations are no longer particularly accurate. We find type 1 and type 2 virus in blisters wherever. But what we do see is that, like all of the other herpes virus family, once a person has been infected with this pathogen, the pathogen stays forever. So with herpes simplex, the pattern is that the virus invades the body. It creates a lesion that will look like a mouth sore or a genital sore. The immune system will react and tamp down the virus, but instead of eradicating it, that virus goes dormant. Both oral and genital herpes are spread through direct contact in mucous membranes. And this is the way a person is first exposed to this infection. But here's the thing. The person carrying the virus to a new potential host does not have to have any visible lesions. Now, when I first learned this, I assumed that this could only happen during the prodrome stage. You know, that there are little hints about when an outbreak is about to happen. But I was wrong, and we've recently found that anyone who has ever had herpes could conceivably have transmissible virus on the surface of their skin around the dermatome of the nerve root that has been colonized, and that can be happening at any given time. And this is how it is that a baby or a young child can have their very first exposure to herpes without ever having been kissed or snuggled or cuddled by someone who has an active lesion. Babies can pick up this virus because they have not yet developed any immune system resistance to it. So when a baby is first exposed to herpes simplex, lots of times it goes completely unnoticed. Babies get little sores and goobers on their face all the time. Lots of us have been exposed to herpes simplex for the very first time by someone who loves us very, very much, and we never knew. And after that first infection, what happened? The virus went into hiding. And it waited and waited and waited. It waited for a special event like your wedding or your graduation or your family reunion, because this is a virus that tends to rebloom, to reactivate when our immune system is suppressed. Like, when we've been working really hard or when we're very, very stressed. With genital herpes, we can have something similar. The virus is spread via skin-to-skin contact to the mucous membranes. One of the really serious things about having genital herpes is that having active open lesions makes a person much, much more vulnerable to other kinds of sexually transmitted infections, including things like HIV and gonorrhea and syphilis and a whole bunch of others. I also have to point out that the mouth and the genitals are not the only places herpes lesions can arise. There's a version of herpes that happens on the hand. It's called herpes whitlow. There's a version of herpes that happens on the trunk and the limbs. It's called a herpes gladiatorum, and it's associated with contaminated wrestling mats. Furthermore, genital herpes isn't exclusive to the genitals. It can occur on the sacrum and the buttocks and the upper thighs. All of these are places where massage therapists might have direct contact. So let's return to our original question. If I understand correctly, what our contributor is wondering is, what does it really mean when a client says they have a history of herpes? Should we deny them service? Do we need to change our massage strategy from what we would do for anyone else? Well, I want to say a bunch of things about this. The first one is that lots and lots of people have a history of herpes, regardless of whether they know it or not. And I absolutely guarantee that if you have put your hands on other humans, you have worked with someone who has a history of herpes. Secondly, and our contributor does bring this up, you probably already have some immunity. Your exposure to someone else's pathogens now is frankly not that important if your immune system is functional. The frequency and severity of herpes outbreaks has a lot more to do with an individual's immune system functioning than it has to do with exposure to other people who have herpes. The incidence of herpes simplex, both oral and genital, is on the downswing. But the overall rates of infection are still really close to around 50%. That means about half of our clients are probably HSV positive, and that number goes up with advancing age. Is it possible to contract herpes simplex then through the kind of direct contact that we do in massage settings? Well, technically, yes. But some other things would have to be in place for that to happen, like the massage therapist needs to have some kind of a vulnerable open lesion on their hands. This can happen all the time because of raggedy cuticles, for instance. Maybe there's a delay in the post-massage hand-washing opportunity. That said, in the years I've been teaching this material to many thousands of massage therapists, I've heard from, maybe 2 or 3 people who think that maybe they picked up a new herpes infection from a client. And of course, there's no way to prove that one way or another. So while it is technically possible, I think it's safe to say that it is unlikely in the extreme that we will pick up a new herpes infection from a client if we practice basic hygienic protocols. Our contributor asks, is this why California went to wearing gloves? Is it more risky with forearms? And I confess I am unfamiliar with this idea. I looked into the California law. I didn't see anything about regulations for wearing gloves unless there are some special circumstances. And no, there's no reason to think that forearms are any more vulnerable than anywhere else. In fact, ragged cuticles and the nicks and cuts and wear and tear that we get from everyday use are much more likely to happen on our fingers and hands than anywhere else. So really, this whole discussion comes down to hygienic precautions. And in that context, let me remind us that the best guideline with hygienic precautions is that we treat all clients as if they could have an infectious disease that passes through direct contact. That would include things like HIV and hepatitis or whatever. Now we just add herpes simplex to this list. It is one of the very good reasons that we don't touch open lesions anywhere on the body and that we wash our hands directly after every session. I think that one of the things this contributor is really getting at in bringing this question up is, what is the purpose of asking about a history of herpes simplex exposure on an intake form? If a person says yes, does that need to change the way we're going to move forward with the session? You can make an argument that, yeah, it's useful to know so that we can encourage people to reschedule their session if they feel they have an active outbreak or one is, soon to come on. But now that we know that asymptomatic shedding of this virus can happen at virtually any time, not just close to outbreaks, I'm less inclined to think that this information should make a big difference for someone who does not have an active outbreak. If they do, obviously that area and the area around it is a local contraindication. But if their skin is intact and they have a history of herpes simplex, they might be shedding virus. We can never know. Ultimately, we need to assume that all of our clients are capable of transmitting some kind of infection through touch. That's why we take such really good care of our hands and we avoid undiagnosed lesions or open skin on our clients' bodies. That's why we take care of our surfaces and our linens and our equipment in such a way that we don't run the risk of spreading any pathogens from one person to another. So, to students and teachers everywhere, I say, exposure to herpes simplex is almost inevitable. The chances are excellent. You already have been exposed and your immune system is keeping you safe. And as long as you take good care of your health and hygiene, this is probably not something that needs to be high on your list of things to worry about. So go ahead and do your work, healthy skin to healthy skin. Take good care of your equipment and yourself, and add joy to the world.
Elevate your bodywork career with Anatomy Train's Structural Integration Certification, ATSI. Discover how to map the pattern and shape the change through inspiring lectures, hands-on body reading, and practical techniques you can use in your practice right away. Join us for ATSI Maine 2026 to 2027, where Tom Myers will personally kick off this transformative professional training. Learn more at anatomytrains.com/ATSI. Precision Neuromuscular Therapy has been teaching high-quality seminars for over 20 years across the country. Founded by Doug Nelson, PNMT uses problem-solving skills and precise treatment options to get powerful results for your clients. PNMT seminars focus on honing your assessment and palpation skills to precisely target the source of your client's pain while understanding the why behind the what. Meet us in a hands-on seminar or online in the PNMT portal and let us join you on your learning journey. Learn more at pnmt.org.